Welcome to a new episode of Manage to Retain, where I talk about issues around business for employees, your customers, recruiting, retention, productivity, and profitability. And I do it with my friends, Sherri and Lou. Listen in, you might get a few tips here on how to do leadership better in your business.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Manage to Retain with my friends Sherri and Lou. Sherri and Lou, how are you all doing today?
Doing great, Vinay. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again as well. Last time we talked about communication, and I actually still want to spend a little more time on this communication thread here. And the reason why is because I feel like I hear a lot of chatter about communication, but it's the same kind of, I want to say Charlie Brown teacher kind of noise, wah, 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 wah in the background, because people are just talking about communication and making more noise, but they're not talking about getting better at communication. They're just talking about more communication.
Right.
How does that sit with you?
Well, I mean, it's like anything else. Just because you've given it more doesn't necessarily make it any better. I can use the analogy of my father. He lets me do this, but I use his analogy. My father was in the Army for over 20 years, and his way of communicating was with a very loud, yelling voice all the time. That's just what he did. He wasn't delicate with his words. That's just how he communicated. And when he would just add more of that to his communication style, it didn't change the fact that nobody wanted to hear the yelling. It still was the same thing. It was just more of it, which creates more of a challenge. Now, looking at it that way, just because you pile a bunch of things into one thing doesn't make it better. It's what you put there that makes it better. How can we change what's not working? Anyone who's listening to this, and I'll guarantee you that just about every single person in some level has a challenge with communicating effectively. If you're a leader, you will certainly see this. So now it's not about more, it's about how, not quantity, but the quality.
Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit I've got some kids, and I don't know that sometimes I communicate effectively. It's probably more efficiently at best. Usually my voice goes up a couple of octaves. It's like, I've told you to clean that room 14 times now, and it's been 6 minutes since I've said it. And that, which is part of the thing, right? Just because I'm saying it more doesn't mean they're actually receiving it. They're kind of still sitting there blinking. All right, well, he doesn't usually blow his top. They're looking at their watch saying, yeah, he doesn't usually blow his top until the 24th time that he says it. So I've got 10 more times before I actually have to do anything. And I think there may be a case study in here in terms of talking with employees where you can keep barking orders at them, but they're still sitting there saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now, because I know with my 8-year-old sometimes that's exactly it's kind of like eyes blinking. All right, am I supposed to actually do anything? I hear words coming out of your mouth, but I don't know what to do. And they're just kind of frozen. Have you ever seen that happen? Because I feel like it's happened to me too many times.
Yeah. It certainly has with children. But with adults, it happens when you're leading people too, because it's about direction. And about really what drives them. What's the driving moment? What's the driving thing? Like with children, specifically, one of the things that I had to learn the hard way later on is with my children was, okay, so you don't really want that game, right? I mean, we can certainly give that to somebody else. If it's there on the floor, you don't want it. That's what I'm seeing. And then they were, well, no, I do. Well, then if you want it, then you should care for it differently. And so then we have to look at it that way with people in general. And sometimes it's a matter of, it's like you had mentioned, it's about being effective. Okay, well, from what I'm seeing, you don't really want to hit the goal of 100% on that particular metric. Well, yes, I do. Oh, okay. Well, then let's talk about this. I mean, let's, really be interested. Let's have effective connection here.
So I'll say one more thing about kids here, and then I want to share a graph that we can take a look at a real live person. Obviously, the name has been changed, but with my kids, sometimes I found that sometimes when I do want them to clean their room, it's a Saturday, I say, "Look, if we get all these things today, we might have time after your soccer game to go and get some ice cream." And it's amazing how fast throwing out the incentive that actually appeals to them, how it changes behavior just like that. I didn't even have to say it 24 more times.
That's right. Yeah, you've given them the reason. Here's to look forward to after.
Right.
Here's
something that they actually cared about, and I said it in their language. So I want to switch to a screen here and share a graph of an individual. So for those who haven't seen something like this before, let me explain to you what you're seeing here. So this is a hypothetical person named Marie Gray, and this is her effectiveness, how she appears in her particular role. Her overall score out of 0 to 100 is a 44, and that's comprised of all these different things, KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics that we've measured for Marie in her current role. And you can see there's places where she's got greens doing really well, or got some stuff in the middle here, the yellows, and areas that she is less effective than others. And if you look at it visually, this graph, blue is Marie, and you can see that on the outside edge is where the outside edge is where you would like her to be. You can see that she's not touching the outside edge. So there's a couple of places that she's better, right? Mm-hmm. But there's some places where there's some room for improvement. And this gray area tells you kind of the average employee in that same exact role and how she compares. Let me ask a question like this, just based on looking at Marie here. Do you feel like the communications with Marie are effective?
Well, I mean, they're effective when it comes down to a couple of these items, because she's above average in very specific things relating to service rates and canceling the customers who do not cancel, and seems to have high scheduled appointment values. She has high scheduling appointments, but the fact of the matter is she doesn't do many of them, it appears. Right, from what I'm seeing, and most likely she's not servicing everyone, and a lot of them, most likely that's why she's getting the subscription cancels. So the communication on one side seems to be effective, but on the other side, not so much. And it's a matter of what is it that Marie is driven? What drives her? Well, she also likes spending time with the customer. She doesn't have time for certain other ones. So this would be a time to really have a conversation to find out where the messaging, that communication, has a gap in.
And people talk about this one size fit. I mean, I think people believe that one size fits all is the easiest way to do things. And this gray area tells you what that one size fits all communication style that's coming across. Efficient, easy to say because, hey, I want you to know about all these things. We're reviewing them every week. But for Marie, that's just not resonating because perhaps she's just got a different set of customers or a different set of routes or a different profile in her job in terms of the types of customers, the technicality of the jobs that she services. And as a result, what is being said for the masses doesn't really apply to her. So she's kind of just sitting there scratching her head going, I'm not really quite certain what you want to do here. And it isn't just necessarily a reflection on her. It's just, she's not, you're speaking Greek and she speaks English. The translation is not being done in the middle. Does that sound right?
Yeah, there's certainly that happening here in some way, most likely. And it's up to us to make that determination.
That's what's so common, right? We know the symptoms, but then the solutions are not as hard as we think. It's just not.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we wanted to be more effective with Marie in this case, I mean, the low number of cancels, well, she's actually got a high number of cancels, which is why she's got such a low score here. This would actually be that she's got a low cancel rate, high appointments service, high completion percentage, high number of actual appointments done number of cancels of the subscriptions, reservices. She's doing lots of reservices. These are all the things that are just not coming through in the message to her, and she's not getting the benefit of the doubt, most likely, in those team meetings where people say, "Hey, why are you dragging us all down?" She's like, "I'm trying to do what I thought I was supposed to be doing," and she doesn't know any different. So these are all areas for management to be a little more effective, so that she go, and the light bulb goes off in her head, right?
Yeah, and looking at it from the perspective, okay, how's everybody else in this team doing, right? Let's not forget that. Was that can certainly also explain gaps. It may not just be individually, it might be team, it might be global. But individually is really what's important here, because most people, we lose one at a time, maybe a lot of them at the same time, but usually independently. So yes, I agree with that 100%, that there is something going, or she's brand new and hasn't been nurtured. There's no development happening here. There hasn't, what's happening in the training part of this? Like, is she really equipped to do her job?
That's what I was saying. It could be as simple as maybe just a retraining, or the training of some sort just did not click right. And could this person be new? That's possible. It takes some time. Or it could be a global issue where the whole team is actually a little below. So you can look at that as like, okay, I think we need to do some training and to refocus.
But again, it's about effective, not just repeating what you said. We're not going to send Marie an email and say, "Hey, I noticed these numbers are down again. Didn't we have this conversation last time? Why are you not changing it?" Right? She's heard that before. We need to become more effective.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask that same question again, I mean, when she potentially responds, "I don't know," I mean, that might actually be a really truthful answer.
Very much so. Yeah, I don't know. I thought I was doing better.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop the screen share here because I'd love to kind of come back to you all. I mean, you have those 10 principles that you use with leaders to help them lead with more influence. Anything that popped to mind in terms of how a leader can, maybe one or two principles that they could think about to help them be more effective here?
Yeah, well, I mean, right off the bat is the equipping principle. We talked about that. In this case, since we talked about this specifically, is we've got to make sure that we're fully equipping people. And in her case, Marie, we got to make sure that we're giving them both ends, not just, okay, here's the process, but now what about the other side? What's the rest of that tool? And that's going to be the support, the encouragement, the communication, all of those little factors that we might need to fill in the blank for. So equipping is the principle that I believe really focuses here. Now, you have to ask yourself when it comes to equipping, do I coach and do I mentor people that I'm moving forward or that I'm training or that I've hired? Are we doing that? If it's not you specifically, are you setting up a way for that to happen? You know, if we don't take the time, another principle of ours, to do something like this, but then come back around and complain and get frustrated when our attrition is really high, we're losing people, and then we're complaining because we then have to take on 70% of the work. Well, instead of complaining that you're taking on as a leader 70% of the work, ask yourselves, what am I doing to do better so that people aren't leaving? And one of those things that we have seen is the equipping principle, taking the time to fully equip those people that you are expecting to hit production.
Well, for those who listen in, hopefully you got some perspective here on how, if you want to increase the level of communication in your organization, it may not be about saying the same things more often. It might be saying more impactful things that can influence how people act. And being able to take a look at a graph like this or a behavior like this about your people can give you some insights as to how to have that conversation so you can be more effective as a leader. So for those who listened in, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, Sherri and Lou, appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you, Vinay.
Yeah, thank you.